Hi, I'm Priyanka. Today I'm going to share with you some of the most common questions used in product management interviews and what interviewers are actually looking for in your responses. In my experience as a product leader, I've been on both sides of the interview process, and I'm so excited to share some tips to help you ace those interviews. Let's dive in. 1. How would you design an oven for a person in a wheelchair? I suggest a 4-step approach for this type of product design question. First, ask clarifying questions and gather information. For example, you can ask, does the person have any disabilities besides being unable to walk? What kind of oven are we talking about? How are they going to be using this product or oven, and so on. Second, start to define what specific problems you want to solve. Next, design the product features. I suggest making a list on pen and paper and then talking your interviewer through it so they understand what is your thought process. And finally, prioritize that feature list that you came up with and share your decisions around what you prioritize to build first in your MVP or minimum viable product and why. 2. Google is thinking about acquiring the question and answer site Quora. Should they acquire it? Why? Or why not? With this question, the interviewer is trying to test your product strategy knowledge. You might begin by thinking out loud about the strategy of both the target company and its potential purchaser. What do these companies fundamentally do? Are their missions aligned? Would the purchaser gain something from this acquisition? Then, think through the customers, the competitors, and overall industry trends, as well as your revenue generation or monetization plans. Ask the interviewer what our goals and success criteria are. For example, do we want to capture a new target market or generate a new revenue stream? Don't forget to summarize your product strategy based on all these different considerations and share the product's value proposition with the interviewer. 3. Estimate the number of videos watched on YouTube per day. Similar to what I talked about for the product design question earlier, I suggest you take a 4-step approach to answering this type of market sizing or estimation question. Step 1. Always start by asking clarifying questions to validate your assumptions. Remember, these questions are meant to be intentionally vague. For example, in this case, you could ask, are we calculating the number of videos watched in North America or just the US? Can we assume that we exclude the videos that are abandoned halfway? And so on. Next, decide whether you will use a top-down or a bottom-up approach and share that with the interviewer. Also share what is your overall approach or formula. For example, in this case, it would be total number of YouTube users multiplied by videos watched per user per day. Estimate this for a few different types of user segments based on user behavior, and then add up the total. Once you share this approach, jump to step 3, which is get into the details and do your estimations. You could start with the US population being 300 million, and how many of that have internet, and how many out of that watch YouTube, and so on. Once you have your answer, in step 4, don't forget to do a reality check on your answer to make sure it sounds reasonable. 4. Give me an example of a time when your product failed. How did you work with others to figure out what was wrong and do a second launch? For these types of behavioral questions, the interviewer is testing a few different things, such as your resilience, your ability to collaborate cross-functionally with different teams, and your ability to be creative. To impress the interviewer with this question, make sure to give real-world examples from your experience on how you tackle challenging situations as a product manager. If you had a failed launch, what did you learn from it? How did you motivate your team to pivot when the product design or strategy changed? 5. How do you measure the success of a product? For this question, I suggest you start by asking, what stage of the product lifecycle are we talking about? For example, if the product is very mature, your customer acquisition and engagement metrics might be already strong, and you might want to focus on customer retention and referral. The R or pirate metrics framework is also quite helpful to remember the stages of the product lifecycle. A stands for acquisition, then A for activation, and then retention, referral, and revenue. So it talks about that different stages in your customer lifecycle. You might also want to ask the interviewer what their success criteria is to align with them and get clarification. For example, you're asked to design the inside of a self-driving car. The interviewer might tell you that the success criteria is Net Promoter Score, which is a referral metric. And then you can design your product with that metric in mind. And there you have it. I hope that gives you a good sense of what to expect in a product management interview and how you can ace your responses.